Hey grade 12s, today we're going to take a look at sine and cosine law word problems. So basically these questions have a couple different wrinkles. Number one, most of the questions we do will not have a diagram. We have to interpret the information in the question and construct a diagram. Then what we need to do is we need to use our vast and extensive knowledge of trigonometry, and we have to decide whether or not we're going to use sine law or cosine law in order to solve the problems. Giddy up, let's go. This question says, we have two boats leaving the same point at the exact same time. They travel at an angle of 110 degrees to one another. They both travel at different speeds over the course of 2 hours. And the question asks, how far apart are they after the 2 hours? So, just like the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So, let's draw a picture. There's one, there's the other, there's the distance. So boat A travels 60 kilometers an hour over 2 hours. So 60 times 2 is 120. So this side of the triangle is going to be 120. And this right here represents the 110 degrees at which they travel towards one another. And boat B is going to be over here. And boat B travels 45 kilometers an hour times 2 hours, which gives us a total distance of 90 kilometers. So we know that this right here is 120, this right here is 90, and we're looking for this distance right here. So let's figure out whether we would use sine law or cosine law in order to solve this. Well, here's what we know. We have two sides and their contained angle. So just like we illustrated in the last lesson, when that's the case, we're doing cosine law. So let's do it. So it's going to be d squared, because that's what we're looking for, equals 120 squared plus 90 squared minus 2 times 120 times 90 times the cosine of 110. 120 squared is 14,400, plus 90 squared is 8,100, minus 2 times 120 times 90. So that's going to be 21,600 times the cosine of 110. So let's figure out what that's going to be. To 4 decimal places, keeping all of them on our calculator, it's going to be negative 0.3420. If we add the 14,400 and the 8,100 together, we get 22,500 less the product of 21,600 and negative 0.3420. Now both of those numbers are negative, so the product will be positive, and we multiply that decimal by 21,600. If we maintain all of our decimal places, we're going to get 7,387.64, which we're going to add to 22,500, and that's going to give us 29,887.64. Now, to figure out what that distance is, we need to take the square root of that fine number, and when we take the square root of it, we are going to get 172.9 kilometers. that's rounded to 1 decimal place, and that is going to be our answer. Since this is the answer to a word problem, we should write out a therefore statement, or at least do something to indicate that this is the answer. I'm just going to put a box around it. The box will be sufficient because it does answer the question. The question is how far apart are they after 2 hours? They're 172.9 kilometers apart. Okay? All right, next example. 2 top chords of a roof truss are both 16 feet. The bearing points on the bottom of the trusses are 25 feet apart. At what angle do the trusses meet? So what in the bejesus is this question asking us? Well, here it is right here. Okay? So let's make a thing here. Let's do there. So this is a thingamaroo. This is a thingamaroo. These are the chords. And this is the bottom. And I'll just adjust this a wee bit. There we go. Okay? Not to scale, but here's what we know. We know that these are both 16 feet. And the bottoms, which are the bearing points, are 25 feet apart. Now it asks at what angle do the trusses meet? Of course, they only meet up here. So we're looking for that angle right there. So if we're looking for that angle right there, can we use sine law or cosine law to figure this out? Well, when we know 3 sides and we're looking for an angle, the answer is always cosine law. So cosine law, we'll have to use some letter to represent this angle. We might as well use the letter A, although it really doesn't matter. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and write out cosine law. So that would be 25 squared, because it's the side opposite the angle that we're looking for, equals 16 squared plus another 16 squared minus 2 times 16 times another 16 times the cosine of angle A, and that's what we're trying to find. 25 squared is 625. 16 squared is 256, so that's another 256. 16 times 16 times 2 would be 512 times the cosine of A. Adding the two 256s, we do get 512 minus 512 cos A. Remember, please resist the temptation of subtracting the two 512s, because this 512 is joined to the hip to that cos of A. But we can take the first 512 and bring it over to the left side and subtract it from 625. When we do that, we're going to get 113 as our answer. Do I like that? Yeah, I like that. And that's going to equal negative 512 cos A. Now to figure out what the cos of A is, we're going to take 113 and divide it by negative 512. We could just leave the negative sign kind of in the middle. That's fine. So 113 negative divided by 512 equals cos of A is negative 0.2207. Now, if I go second cosine, I'll find the measure of that angle to the nearest degree is 103 degrees. So that is the angle at which the two trusses meet. So, like I said, I can just put in a wee old little box around this, and that will show that that's the answer to the question. All right, time to do another example. And I think this is the last one. Yep, here we go. Buddy and Naomi are holding up a kite, one on each side of it. Their angles of elevation to the kite are 35 and 45 degrees respectively. Buddy's kite string is 8 feet long. How far are Buddy and Naomi standing from one another? So we're going to need to draw a picture here. You're going to witness my great artwork. Here is Buddy. Okay? Here is Naomi. Now, what we know is that we've got, all right, whatever. Here we go. So, so we got, there we go. We got a kite up here, and we got same thing here. Okay. Angle of elevation of the kite's 35 degrees and 45 degrees. So that means that the angle between Buddy's line of sight and the kite string itself, that is what 35 degrees is. Okay. And same thing for Naomi, that's 45 degrees. Now it says that Buddy's kite string is 8 feet long, so that's 8 feet. And what we want to know is how far they're standing from one another. So we're looking for this side of the triangle. So if we only know one side and we're looking for another side, cosine law is not going to help. So we're going to use sine law here. But in order to use sine law and to find a side, we need to know the opposite angle. So how do we find the opposite angle? Well, we know that all the angles in a triangle add up to 180. We also know that we have an angle of 35 degrees and an angle of 45 degrees. So 35 and 45 add up to 80 degrees. So 180 less 80 is 100 degrees. So this angle here is 100 degrees. So we can use that in order to help us find the distance that Buddy and Naomi are standing apart. So let's go ahead and figure this out. We'll call that distance d, and that's going to be d over the sine of the opposite angle, which is 100. Now the other matching pair that we're going to use in this question are probably going to be these ones, because that's the only other ones we have, 45 degrees and 8 feet. So up top will be the distance, that's 45. Oopsies, I can't write. It's not true. Don't listen to me. It's not 45. It's 8. And on the bottom, it's the sine of the angle, which is your 45 degrees. Sorry about that mistake. So let's figure out the right side. We could actually figure out what the sines are first and work with that. So the sine of 100 degrees. Sine of 100 degrees is 0.9848. Sine of 45 degrees is 0.7071. So the first thing that we're going to do is divide 8 by 0.7071. And when we do that, we get 11.31. I'm going to cut that off. I have all the digits on my calculator yet, and then we're going to cross multiply and multiply 11.31 by 0.9848, And I did something silly, so you're just going to have to hold on here. 11.31 times 0.9848 equals 11.1 feet. So that's the distance between Buddy and Naomi. All right? So again, we had to draw a picture. Then we had to identify whether we were using sine law or cosine law. We decided on sine law. It's the only one we could use. And the trick to this question was identifying that 100-degree angle. We had to use the fact that angles in a triangle add up to 180 to help us get there. And then we just applied sine law, and we found that Buddy and Naomi were standing 11.1 feet apart. That's it for me. You're going to get some practice questions to do on this. Make sure to try and do as many of them as you possibly can.